No. Nobody puts Pretty Baby in the corner. I feel disillusioned about roller skating.
KO, also known as Salem, pronouns they them, is a roller derby and park roller skater. KO has been a member of the Greater Sudbury Roller Derby League, which is now disbanded, Nickel City Roller Derby, Ottawa Valley Roller Derby, Ottawa Roller Derby, Kingston Roller Derby, and has also skated for unaffiliated leagues Lee Bush and Nord Stars.
Hi, I'm Mean Bean, and this is Feels on Wheels, a talk show about roller skating. Hi, KO, Pretty Baby.
The jaunty little. Your hat sounds so straight. Okay. I was like, your hat. I saw you. I'm like, little jaunty angle, then you're just like backs down straighter. These are two very different hat vibes. I'm just saying.
KO.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Glad to be here.
Let's just get it out of the way. Can we talk about our outfits? What's going on here?
Pretty Baby.
Well, we just wanted to do something extra because the last time we did an interview together, pretty sure it was your idea. You were in full roller derby gear, skates and everything, jorts.
The two things that I remember most about being in full roller derby gear, including skates on a pool floaty in your pool, was one, being in your helmet, but I was dying. It was so hot, and then
I'm so sorry.
My outfit. Shirt is from Sister Slag, which was the first ever sanctioned team I played on. I have on Antic MG2 Bontathena plates. Really heavy. I'm hoping this doesn't go badly for me. And this is a helmet that I borrowed because I forgot mine at home.
What about your jort?
Oh, yeah. Well...
It was so hot.
The first thing I did after getting onto that floaty was Bean was kind enough to make sure I had something to drink, and I just immediately spill it. And I had to spend the entire interview sitting in a pool of mango juice. Cheers. Cheers. And now I have to drink this without spilling it.
And also, you're very kind not to mention, but it was a long interview and my camera frickin' died. And I lost like half of it. And you also were changing jerseys.
Oh, yes.
That was also part of the bit. So like you had jerseys and you were changing into them. It was this whole thing. It was so funny. And like the freaking camera died. It was so sad.
I was really impressed though. Like, for all the things, there were costume changes on top of a floaty in the middle of the pool. I was wearing roller skates. I mean, it wasn't deep enough for me to drown, but I'm like, we're gonna end up in the drink, but we did not. Those skates were dry the entire time.
That is one of my favorite memories of doing the documentary. It was so ridiculous, but it was so fun. And obviously this does not top it, but I mean, it's the middle of winter, so like, bear with us.
During the summer, we're going to do this again in your pool, but in the same exact outfit.
Oh, good idea. I love that.
It started with the jorts. Do we not all just play roller derby in jorts? I don't know why people stopped.
Clear choice.
High fashion, so many pocket, jorts life. When I started playing roller derby, it was on a surface that was abhorrent. It was the old Navy League Hall in Sudbury, which had these old wooden slats. The boards individually had warps, so all their little edges were sticking up. So every time that you got hit down or fell, it hurt because there's all these little wooden ridges that you're hitting. So when I started, I was wearing jorts on top of my leggings, one as a little bit of extra padding for the fall, but also as skid prevention. And because I can't half-ass a thing, I'm gonna whole-ass a thing. I'm not wearing jorts, but we did go for a full denim look.
Canadian tuxedo.
We have got a denim on denim going. We have a jaunty little cap that says...
Pretty Baby.
It says Pretty Baby. Was it a 45 minutes ago, or have I had it this whole time? Who knows?
How did you get started in roller skating?
As an awkward person, I had a friend who worked in a bookstore. I was waiting for my friend to finish their shift, so I was waiting at the cash register in awkward silence with one of their coworkers who put down a pamphlet and was like, want to join roller derby? And because I had an inability to say no to people, I'm like, okay. And so a week later they had, it wasn't a 101, it was a show up, find out what roller skating's like. And it was in the middle of absolute nowhere. This is already in Northern Ontario, and it was in Coniston, this weird building in the middle of the woods. They had a gym, and I was the only person who showed up to learn. So I'd borrowed a pair of skates from someone, which was really lucky. They had a couple small-footed people there, because I wear children's shoes. Pinky and Krista took my hands and like literally walked me in circles around the track a couple times, and I felt tall. This is really cool, and I want to do this again. 101 started, and for the next 4 or so months, I would drive 20 minutes into the city, 20 minutes out of the city to this small town in the middle of nowhere, practice, and then drive 40 minutes back at home in the dead of night. These streets, they didn't have street lights.
I mean, it is Northern Ontario, so...
It's kind of what most of it's like.
Yeah.
It's gotten better.
There's large swaths of Northern Ontario that are exactly as you described.
Well, Sudbury is slightly more south. Well, it counts as Northern Ontario,
right.
but like just.
I guess we'll say Sudbury is Northern Ontario.
It's a status thing. How north are you from?
Timmins, I win.
It's true, you do. So the league that I started with was Greater Sudbury Roller Derby. They no longer exist. There's a 2-year break when I was living in Ottawa, and then I got my master's degree where I had to stop because as a student I had neither the time nor money to keep skating. So I've been at this roller skating thing for 13 years. When I ended up back in roller derby, I redid my fresh meet before rejoining. The reason why I started it up again was I really enjoyed roller skating. But the thing that really kept me there and kept me invested in roller skating and in the league and the community in general was I was working a really shitty job, and I was having like a really bad time just with everything. And I had engaged in self-harm around that time. And with the rules set at that time, people were still able to grasp with thumbs. So now you have to use an open-handed grasp. So you used to end up with a lot more bruises along your arms. That for a while kind of helped with the self-harm stuff. And I know that sounds very bad and unhealthy, but the more time I spent there and the more time I spent like actively engaged with people I like and like moving my body and the endorphins that come with exercise made all of the other stuff that I was dealing with easier to deal with. By the time I played my first like full season, it wasn't about like, the thumbprints and like the marks and there being like something that was a substitute for self-harm. I didn't feel the need for it anymore. There's a space or community of like queer people or people within different walks of life, but it felt like being able to work together as a team towards a common goal. I didn't feel any pressure on me at that time. It was just something I could go and enjoy and do for myself. What I recognize now I was going through in the time was actually like super intense burnout. I had developed an actual rage anger problem that was there for at least half of my 20s. I was angry all the time, and like if I was angry at things then I wasn't sad at things. It was a healthy outlet physically, but also then having a place where I could like make friends, because when you live in a small town in the middle of nowhere and you are above high school age, no one stays in their small towns in the middle of nowhere. Lively sucked. Still sucks. It's gotten worse, not better. It was a way to like put the frustration that was causing everything else into a competitive spirit and a push to do better for myself. Like, can I go faster? Can I do this thing? Rather than just getting stuck in a cycle of being angry about being stuck without feeling like I had any ability to control things. By the time I came back, Greater Sudbury Roller Derby had folded and merged into Nickel City Roller Derby. When I played for Nickel City, we weren't the best team, but what we were was a fun time. We had a reputation. The other teams are always like, we're always happy to come and play against you, one, because you're fun, but also we closed down the bar every time. We had dedicated after party spot. It was kind of split into two halves. So you had the front end where there was always karaoke and music, and then there was the back end where there was some couches and pool tables. So no matter what vibe you had, there was an option for everybody. And I have like really fond memories of like just lying on these couches under a big pile of other people, just talking about how much fun you had and what a good game things were, even when we lost. It was very much a if we win win, that's great, but we're here to have a good time atmosphere. Looking back, those are still some of my favorite Derby memories.
You still seem to have a large part of your heart belongs with Northern Ontario.
There's something about like home is where the heart is, but also home league might be where the heart is. I've been in Ottawa 7 years now, and I still think, sorry, Nickel City's still got my heart when it comes down to it, really.
Shit's getting serious.
Sudbury is literally a hole in the ground, and I cannot mean literally more. Once upon a time, there was a meteor that thought, wow, that's a shitty place. Let's remove it off the face of the earth. Bam! Hit Sudbury, created a nickel deposit, which unfortunately meant it boomed as a mining city, and the city itself was born. That being said, everyone shits on Ottawa for being the city where fun goes to die, but they've never been to Sudbury, which is just... there's nothing pleasant I can say about Sudbury.
Unless you're from Timmins, and Sudbury was the highlight. Gotta say, Sudbury was a fun time if you were from Timmins. So do you want to talk about that Northern Ontario scrimmage?
I was so excited. I went to Nipissing University, and while I was there, they actually did try and start up a roller derby team. This was before I did my fresh meet the first time. It was my first experience finding out what roller derby was. It never really happened. It never got off the ground. And then I went and played in Sudbury for a few years. Once I was living in Ottawa, then the Nipissing Roller Derby League was starting, and I was so excited, and my goal was either to play for them or against them. Coming up playing roller derby in Northern Ontario, we had a lot of small teams, and so you constantly played pickup roller derby. There would be a doubleheader. I'd play the first game with Sudbury, and then I'd play the second game with the team we had just played against a third team. There were so many chances for you to meet different people, but which is one of the reasons why I look back at this time super fondly. I have met so many cool people this way. There's people who I met who play on Team Canada. There's people who I still know from this time who are now currently news kids. I was really lucky to start playing when and where I did. So in short, I was very excited. I was finally getting to play for or against this team that I had first brought up in 2009. I'm like, oh, it's finally come full circle. And me and some friends who also play with Kingston, OVRD, and ORD, we got a little cabin out in the woods. We had such a good weekend, and then the game happened. I think I maybe got 8 minutes of gameplay. We didn't have a lot of people who wanted to jam. Apparently only myself and one other person had indicated that they were willing to jam. And normally I'm only willing to jam at lower level roller derby because I'm not particularly proficient at it. But then the higher level game came by and we didn't have enough people who were willing to do that. So I ended up jamming on and off, which was mostly fine until it wasn't fine. I was jamming. I managed to get out, get lead. The other jammer was stuck behind my tripod, and I was coming around and I was trying to figure out my approach. And I looked at that jammer, and that jammer looked at me, and I'm like, oh, I know deep down 100% this person is going to hit me. And I looked at them and I'm like, they're standing real tall. If I don't get higher, the odds of me getting hit in the head are really high, because that had been an ongoing theme of the year for me. And I also said to myself, all right, the way they're probably going to hit me is they are going to sidestep into me and try and knock me off the track and run back. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get a little taller, and then I'm going to let them hit me so that I can transition through it. What they did instead was a nice solid shoulder to legal target zone right here. And because I was tall and expecting something to force me to the side, trying to step into a transition, it was a really bad position for me to be in. Rather than me being able to spin myself out of it, rather than just a fall, my feet went up and my head went right back hard into the cement. There's a video of it. It looks real rough, and the funniest thing about it, there's a guy sitting next to the people recording. You can just hear him go, ow. It gets me every time.
That shouldn't be funny, but
it really is.
Ow, indeed.
I was there, I was on the ground, there's 3 referees standing over me, and I call it because I'm like, well, that's probably the best plan. So they call it. I think I landed mostly on my tailbone, but I rolled back, knocked my head against the ground, and then bounced, head went up and back down.
Oh man.
I got a full 8 minutes of gameplay in Northern Ontario before I essentially took myself out through a series of bad decisions.
And you were very concussed.
I was super concussed. I sat down with the first aid and I felt fine. Like my back was a little bit sore. So they're like, well, what do you need? They didn't do the eye check thing. And I don't know if anything would have happened then anyway. But they gave me an ice bag. I shoved it up the back of my shirt because my back hurt a little bit. And by the time the 3 jams were over, I was debating whether or not to go back on. I'm like, that was a pretty hard bounce. I should sit for a little bit, reassess, and then I can decide what I was going to do. And in the end, I decided to not go back on. I stayed on the bench, but I felt fine all that day. We went to the beach later that night. The next day, went for ice cream, drove all the way home, no problem. It wasn't until like a week later when I was having a work meeting, and at the time I'm like, oh yeah, I hit my head playing sports, so I'm like not on my game while at work. So I started a work meeting with that, and it was at the end of a long day. I'd worked overtime all week, and the next day I come in and I work for the government. A relatively high-level government official sent to my boss an email saying, your employee is clearly concussed. What are they doing at work?
Whoa.
Yeah, so like,
wow.
In hindsight, don't let people who are concussed make decisions. In hindsight, I absolutely lacked the ability to recognize that there was a problem. The next day, they're like, you need to go and get a doctor's note so that we can get you the accommodations, the time off work, whatever it is you need, because yeah, okay, this is a problem. So I called my doctor. He couldn't do anything aside from try and book me a CT scan, but it would take months. So he's like, you need to go to the emergency room. So I went to the emergency room and made it a very short 8 hours to get a CT scan done. It showed absolutely nothing, but the ER doctor was very kind and said, we can give you a referral to a concussion clinic. And it was such a great help. The concussion clinic, 10 out of 10. If you hit your head and you think you might have a concussion, get yourself a referral to a concussion clinic. So I ended up taking about 5 months where I wasn't doing full-time work. I was never 100% off work. Concussion recovery has changed since I started roller derby. I was expected to continue to going to work at very, very, very reduced hours. For the first couple weeks, I think I may have been at work for like a collective 6 hours a week. But you want to keep doing things to like reinforce the neural pathways that you had before. Also, you're supposed to get lots of sleep. So much sleep. Also, I was on a wild number of multivitamins. This happened mid-September. It took till, I think, the beginning of January for me to return to full-time work.
And you were dealing with a lot of symptoms.
There was a while ago where I remember we were hanging out and I was talking about something in your car. Essentially, you told me I didn't sound like a drunk person anymore.
Oh. After you were concussed, you did talk just a little slower.
Trying to keep complex thoughts in my mind was impossible. Short-term memory was absolutely gone. 0% like short-term memory. My vocabulary was bad. Reading, absolutely done. But also, like trying to connect complex ideas, even if I wanted to, and I really did. Part of the frustrations that I had, once I got a little bit further from the start of the concussion, I gained the ability to realize the things that I couldn't do. And it was very scary being like, there's entirely a possibility that I don't recover from this in a way that I gained back the ability to think and process things in the way that I used to. And that was terrifying to me, which also caused a lot of crying. I cried a lot. Emotional dysregulation was also one of my very early symptoms. It was also one of the ones that faded the fastest, but the first month I was crying constantly. Tired, cry. Watch something kind of sad, cry. Try to read something, but you can't quite grasp what happened 5 pages ago and you're upset, cry. Try and make soup, but you realize at the end it was supposed to be a tomato soup and there were no tomatoes in it. It's like, well, cry.
And you did physio as well, right?
I had a occupational therapist, a physiotherapist, and my nurse practitioner. So there was physiotherapy because the other big symptom that I had, the part where your brain can receive visual information from your eyes and make work of it. It did take about a week, I think, for a lot of my symptoms to set in, and I'm not sure how normal that is post-concussion. But for example, if you have your field of vision, my field of vision was actually very small. There was only a very small, like that much, that I could focus on and actually have in focus. Everything else was blurry and mostly conceptual. I recognized there was a tree there, but it was a vague shape. There was an idea of a tree there. One of the first tests that they did was literally the one where they take the finger and do this. I actually had to asked them to stop because it made me feel very bad.
Yeah, and watching videos too, right?
Yeah, around December was when I was able to watch moving screens again, but not all of them. I remember I was watching a video about a bagel place in NYC, and they showed the dough mixer, and as it twisted, my brain was like, no, stop right now. It wasn't that I felt vertigo, I didn't get dizzy, it was just an immediate full body no. If I did certain things, I had some real bad balance issues.
And you're back skating.
I tried it once in early December. I started bicycling really early, because I had zero balance issues on my bicycle. I bicycled to every single one of my appointments.
You threw on skates for the first time. I was there with you. It was
Yeah.
at OQS.
They wanted me to go back to things that were normal as soon as possible, but I don't think they understood roller derby. So they're like, okay, what would progression look like? It was like, okay, so it sounds like pushing is okay, like loco is okay. And then I kind of explained the progression to them more, and they're like, okay, no, back to solo drills. There's also some days where you do something one day and you just, generally speaking, wouldn't feel it to the next. It's the same if I tried to go too hard with reading or physical activity. Early on in the concussion, 15 minutes was really the max amount of time I should have been doing anything. And so you don't realize you kind of pushed it too far. And there's a threshold and you're good until you meet that threshold, and all of a sudden you're not good anymore. There are some things that still have lingered. My vocabulary still isn't quite where it was at. If I'm too tired, I will still have some light sensitivity. But it's also just, I have a new baseline now. I have a new set of normal, and in discussion with my occupational therapist and my physiotherapist, it's possible that this is just a new normal. It's possible that even though technically I've been cleared of a concussion, there are some other things that will linger.
And you did a lot of physical activity while you're off, right?
It was really recommended for me to do. I would swim regularly. I went to the gym twice a week. I was doing weightlifting. One of the things they actually recommended was at least 20 minutes of activity a day. There was a lot of recommendation towards physical activity as long as it wasn't roller skate based.
So that's roller derby, but you've also tried park skating. So what got you interested in park skating? Me?
All my friends are doing it. Why shouldn't I do it?
I think you came to the yard.
Speaking of concussions in the yard, it was back really early when the yard opened. And I was in the upstairs part, knew absolutely nothing about anything. Had not watched a single video, was just how hard can dropping in be? That was a mistake. I dropped in. Oh, in roller derby, you want to keep your weight backwards. So I dropped in and then dropped my weight backwards. And as I went back and cracked my head against the ramp, so it turns out on ramps, you keep your weight forwards. I know that now. It was so embarrassing that this A-team skater, someone who's fairly well known, they owned Neon Skates, came, essentially picked me up off the floor, was like, you are not driving yourself home, called their husband came, so she drove me home, made sure I was home and safe and okay, then her husband came and got her and took her home.
But yeah, you even custom built some park skates.
I'm why don't I just buy really expensive roller skates, which I think it's actually funny because I did get a custom colorway. My skates say Heaven Piercing, which is a really nerdy thing because it's a reference to it's related to my favorite clusterfuck of an anime. It's called Tenga Toppa Gurlagon, but I went out of my way, got a really, really nice setup. Thanks, Alex from Rito Rollers. And now that they're done, paid for, I've got them, I love them, but they're not that far off from your color scheme and your skates. And you just bought yours at Flat Out. Am I still super pleased with them? Yes. But I think it's funny how close our skates look.
I mean, we do like to match outfits, so.
Did we plan this out for weeks on end? Roller derby in other communities is not as queer as it is in Ottawa. When I started roller derby in Sudbury, it is still the highest number of queer people in any one place in one time, aside from possibly the gay bar. There was a lot of queer people in the Sudbury League, but I don't know if I would have been yeah, that's gay. But if I'm talking about roller derby or at least OVRD, I'm yeah, that's pretty gay.
I've been told.
I'm saying that as someone who has a background in theater, which is also pretty gay, and I have a gender studies degree. So I'm in some homosexual spaces. I have been up to some gay shit for some time. And roller derby is the gayest of the gay shit that I have been up to.
I'm very sorry. I also have a gender studies degree.
Oh, shit.
I also play roller derby. Library school's the gayest thing that I've ever done.
Library school?
Library school.
Wow. Okay, so library school.
Roller derby. Gender studies degree. Boop.
Do you see yourself going back to derby?
Part of being an impulsive person, and sometimes I don't always think my decisions through, and that's intentional, in which case so is this one. As long as I don't think about it, I don't have to make a choice about anything. My future is free and clear, and I can do what I want when I want. If I get to the point where I think I can rejoin roller derby without making me feel really bad about myself, I'll do so. But until then, I'm just gonna figure it out as I go. I still really love roller skating, and it's just kind of hard when most of the opportunities to roller skate are involved with something that's made me feel really bad about myself over the past little bit.
Why did roller derby make you feel really bad about yourself?
I have been roller skating in some capacity for 12 years, and pandemic aside, if I were to play roller derby this season, it would have been 10 years of actively playing games. But in those 10 years of actively playing games, the number of them that I have been on a team and actually been able to play roller derby any more than bench warmer or spare parts has been realistically 2 years playing with Sudbury, and I guess it's been 2 seasons now that I've played with Kingston. And that's kind of it. That's not a lot to show for a thing I've been at since debatably 2012, depending on how you want to math it out. And so at some point in time, it's just this kind of sucks. How much more do you have to put of yourself into something to get what you want before you're I'm not going to get what I want? When do you call it quits? You push through something not being fun because you're if I do it a little bit more, it'll start being fun again. Or you're well, I enjoy these other pieces of it. Because I knew I was coming on here, and I know that you often oh, what are your feels on roller skating? So I'm oh, how would I answer that question? And then I'm well, how do I answer that question without being a bummer? Because my answer ranges anywhere from despair, distraught, it makes me want to lie on the floor and cry. I've done a lot of that in the past year or so. I don't think that it's a healthy thing. If this is something that's going to make me cry, that's not good for me. And I've done a lot of that. Not just in relation to the concussion. Completely unconcussion, but pro roller derby related. Crying. Roller derby is like a bad relationship. Sometimes you just need to accept that the thing you love isn't going to love you back. And then you have to figure out where your boundaries lie. If it's a bad relationship, at what point do you dump a person? Or how, are there other ways to coexist? So it's kind of a question that I really wasn't hoping that I'd ever have to ask myself.
What about park skating?
Park skating is fun. It's a little bit scary, and as someone who just had 1 to 2 concussions in the past calendar year, I want to say yes, but also I think I need to be a little bit cautious. Park skating is just a big risk factor, I guess, at this point. But I'm already dumb enough. I don't need more head trauma. Who's the most handsome man in the world? Yeah.
I've heard from a couple of people who are good skaters, but they're I'm intimidated about joining roller derby because I feel I'm going to accidentally offend somebody because of pronouns. They may have had some bad experiences where they felt they were reprimanded or whatever for making a mistake. So I just wanted to kind of see what your take was.
People who make mistakes, and it's gonna happen. I mean, even when I talk about myself in the past, or quote people about me, sometimes I'm what is more important in this context? Using the correct pronouns that I use now, or accurately reporting what this person had said? But you have to remember that if you're assuming a pronoun and you get it wrong, this isn't the first time that someone has got it wrong. It could be the 6th time that day. And it could be this person's been dealing with microaggressions for years. You have to balance, okay, as a person who's experienced lots of microaggressions and then some outright aggression, as that person you're okay, so do I have it within me today to have grace and patience against something that's fairly consistently used against me? Or is it not on me today to be the person who has to be the kind one? No matter what, it's a pressure. It's nice if the person does, but you're the person who's received the microaggression. So it's a lot to put on people consistently. So I will never begrudge someone who isn't able to kindly say, that's okay, that's fine. But also as someone I personally today was misgendered 4 times. And that's a lot for one day. I recognize the person's trying, but also I recognize that it's ingrained in people. Gender expressions are ingrained from a young age, and even if there are a lot more queer people now, it's still something that's taught to people from a young age. So there are going to be mistakes, and I personally try and pick and choose my battles. But I won't begrudge anyone who does get mad, and I won't be no, they shouldn't do that. If people aren't willing to join something because they're afraid of being reprimanded, then what is the actual issue here? Is it like, if it's I don't want to make a mistake and hurt somebody, well then why can't you just go in with best intentions and do your best, and when you make a mistake genuinely apologize and try and do better, versus, oh, doing this thing is a lot of work and it's going to be hard and I know I'm going to get in trouble because I can't do it right. And it's a very me-centered thing, I guess. Ask yourself deep down, why does it upset you? Does it upset you because you think you're going to hurt someone else, or does it upset you because you think you're going to get hurt? Is kind of my take.
And so your advice, if somebody did want to join the space?
If you don't go and join these spaces and try, how will you know if you can succeed? Like, how are you going to get better if you don't put forth the effort to do it? And this space might be that space to do it. If you go in with a genuine effort to try, don't go in and be like, sorry guys, I might get it wrong. Don't do that, because then you're setting yourself up for failure, versus just go in, try, and if you get it wrong, you apologize privately to the person, don't make it about you, and move on. You'll probably be fine. As a fat person who doesn't use she, her, like, I've also misgendered other people. Other people have been like, hey, you've misgendered me like 3 times today. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I do my best to fix it and move on. It's an opportunity to prove to their own selves that, 1, they can do a thing, 2, that they can grow as a person and try. It's a willingness to put themselves out there. I mean, if it does become a reoccurring problem, then, make sure you fix yourself.
I love
That
that.
being said, if you can't come in with a genuine desire to do better, and you just want to excuse the fact that you don't intend to use people's pronouns, you're gonna have a bad time. I feel despair. Whoa. I don't know, man, it's complex, like, about roller skating.
You want to say anything positive about roller skating?
In the small amount of time that I have been back on skates, like, there's still a lot of joy in skating.